if you know where to look. A map of Africa holds a secret. On the shores of the Atlantic, 5,000 miles from America, there is a place called Maryland, founded by freed American slaves who set sail from Fells Point 17 decades ago.
But they found a new day, actually. That was a new day. They found it here.
Tonight, a remarkable adventure with 11 News reporters Tim Tootin, John Sanders, and photographer John Brosnan. A journey back in time and across the globe to rediscover Maryland's long-lost family.
Most of our fathers, our grandfathers, came from America.
It is a place and a people that have been lost in history until tonight.
There's so much valuable history. There's so much link. There's so much in common that we have.
This is the Maryland America forgot. This is Africa's Maryland. Now, from Maryland County in the Republic of Liberia, Tim Tootin.
Hello from Harper City on the remote western coast of Africa. We're a long ways from home, but there's a familiar feeling here, and Baltimore Street runs right through the middle of downtown. We've traveled thousands of miles to see this place, to walk in the footsteps of freed slaves who left the bondage of our Maryland to build free lives in this new Maryland, a world away.
Tonight, we will retrace their daring and dangerous journey across the Atlantic. We'll meet their descendants and uncover the few surviving clues of what they began here. We'll be going to places never before seen on American television. A remarkable story has been left for us to discover. A story still playing out here in Africa's Maryland.
Today, much of Maryland County, Liberia, looks just as it did when the first settlers arrived from Baltimore in 1834. A tropical paradise where palm trees and white beaches stretch untouched for miles. 4,900 miles southeast of Baltimore, Maryland is one of 15 counties in the country of Liberia on the southern tip of West Africa. It's less than half the size of our Maryland and home to about 90,000 people, less than 2% of Maryland's population in America. Just off one street in Maryland's capital city of Harper, there's a hidden spot where history happened. Local historian Henry Ward leads us through the brush to a shaded beach where those first Marylanders set foot on African soil.
This place is supposed to be, and it is, the spot in the vicinity on which the first group of pioneers that came to establish the state of Maryland from the United States arrived.
It was the end of an historic journey that began on the other side of the Atlantic, in our Maryland. In 1822, the American Colonization Society, funded by the U.S. government, began helping emancipated slaves and free blacks return to Africa to their own colony called Liberia.
And it was almost an instinctive idea of going back to Africa.
Richard Hall literally wrote the book on Africa's Maryland. And on Africa's Shore, he explains why Maryland broke away from the national colonization effort, which was influenced by pro-slavery interest.
They specifically stated in a new charter that their purpose was to eliminate slavery in Maryland. They intended to create a homeland for American, specifically Maryland's black people in Liberia, separate from Liberia proper.
Maryland would ultimately send more than 1,000 settlers to its African colony. In 1834, the first arrivals were welcomed with a ceremony not too different from what we encountered at the seaside village of Kavala, a few miles from Harper City. Settlers met the local population called the Graybo, already living in what would become the Maryland colony. Though the Graybo still speak their own language, many already knew English when the first Americans arrived, thanks to British traders sailing Africa's coast. Early documents from those days can still be found, tucked away at the Maryland Historical Society. Among them, a handwritten letter sent from Africa in 1836. Settler Eliza Jane Wilson wrote to her father in Queen Anne's County.
My dear father, you will see by this letter that I have arrived safe and in good health. Here I can enjoy myself, can come and go when I please, and there is no one to trouble or trample on me. I don't say you will be rich, but if you want liberty, I say come.
Despite her optimism, Eliza Wilson would die of disease 5 years after her arrival in Africa. Early settlers faced hunger, illness, and tensions with neighboring tribes. In 1834, Joshua Stewart wrote in despair to his wife in Baltimore. He was ready to return to America at any cost.
Oh, I am sorry. Yes, sorry that I ever came to this country. I will sell myself for a slave for the sake of getting home once more.
Shocking as that letter sounds today, historian Henry Ward says it's not surprising. Those were difficult times.
Some people got sick and died on the ship. Not all of them arrived, sir. And when they finally arrived, some even beside the seasick got attacked by malaria. It was a dangerous thing. But in the end, they knew that the end would justify that means. They knew when they finally arrived, there was light in the end of the tunnel. And that light was liberty, freedom.
For 22 years, more than 30 ships sailed from Fells Point, bound for Africa's Maryland. It merged with the neighboring Republic of Liberia in 1857 and took the name Maryland County. For 7 days, we traveled the muddy, bumpy, almost impassable roads of Maryland County. We found little that remains of what the first settlers built when they arrived from Baltimore. One exception, this Episcopal church in Kavala, built by missionaries who arrived in 1834 on the first ship from Baltimore to America. Behind the church, the graves of early settlers born in America: Boston, Massachusetts; Milton, Pennsylvania; Washington, D.C. Crumbling but vivid reminders of forgotten family ties. We also met Alexander Brewer. He lives in Harper City and still has relatives in Maryland, USA. He's a descendant of the freed slaves who settled this country.
So they said, okay, we'll take the challenge of the sea. We'll jump on the sea, we'll jump on a little schooner, and we'll go as far as we can go, because they already had some feeling or thoughts that they will find freedom along the west coast of Africa.
For the freed slaves who settled this country, the trip from Baltimore took more than 2 months. Today, it takes only a few days, but it's still a trip you must see to believe. Here's John Sanders on the grand adventure from Maryland to Maryland.
It's not easy to get to Maryland County, Liberia. There are no direct flights from America, so we go by way of Brussels, Belgium. It takes us 2 full days just to get into the country, landing here, Liberia's capital, Monrovia, named for American President James Monroe, an early supporter of colonization. Many of the city's residents are refugees of a civil war that just ended in 2003. About 1 million people live here.
When you first arrive, it's a city that overwhelms the senses. It's difficult just to move around on these streets, choked with traffic and blasted by war. It's said that bumps in these roads aren't potholes, they're rocket craters.
Maryland County is still more than 200 miles away from this capital city, Back home, that trip would take a few hours, but Liberia's roads get even worse outside Monrovia. The war left them so dilapidated that it would take 2 hard days to drive to Maryland County. So our only option, hitch a ride on a cargo helicopter run by the United Nations. They're here keeping the peace as Liberia recovers from the fighting. Inside, it's not exactly first class, and it smells like bread. We're hauling food for peacekeeping troops in Maryland County. Soon we're in the air, following the Atlantic coast south. For 2 hours, we stare out the open windows at some of the most stunning scenery I've seen anywhere on Earth. Mile after mile of untouched beaches and rainforest. As we descend, we calculate it's taken us 6 days to travel from Maryland to Maryland. And as we leave the helicopter, we realize these Marylanders have laid out the red carpet. We didn't expect to be the center of attention, but here we are, receiving the keys to the city and being shown Liberia's trademark handshake, ending with a snap of the fingers. Why all the excitement? They tell us we're the first American TV crew to visit Maryland County in at least 30 years. That devastating civil war has kept visitors away.
As recently as the 1980s, these streets here in the city of Harper were filled with traffic, and these rotting buildings were seaside mansions. Liberia and Maryland County were called jewels of Africa. Those freed slaves' dreams of a promised land continued until their paradise became a nightmare. And Africa's Maryland suddenly turned deadly and dark. Civil war in Liberia began in 1989 and continued for almost 15 years. Its causes were complex, but some of the origins date back to Liberia's earliest days. The descendants of American slaves were always a minority among the native population of Liberia, but it was often the slaves' descendants who held political power. Violence began in the countryside, forcing refugees to flee only with belongings they could carry to the safety of the cities. Not all of them made it. They were often stopped at gunpoint along the roads.
We just, call out 1 or 2 persons and accuse them, and just kill them beside you. We saw that. I saw it personally.
As refugees flooded the capital city, Monrovia's population quickly doubled, from 500,000 to 1 million. Those decades of pent-up tension led to unimaginable brutality in places as unlikely as this Lutheran church on busy Tubman Boulevard in the nation's capital. In 1990, more than 3,000 people were sent here for safety. On July 29th, soldiers broke in, hunting for the father of rebel leader Charles Taylor.
The massacre lasted from the early morning up to late morning, around about 5, 6 o'clock.
Reverend Thomas Pay is pastor of the St. Peter's Lutheran Church. At the time of the war, he'd been assigned to another congregation just outside the city. But each and every day, he relives the massacre.
On that morning, the men were in here. The women were in the school building back there, the St. Peter Lutheran High School, next to this building. Women and children were there. They used machine gun and machete, cutlasses in the Liberian way. When they ran out of ammunition, they took knives and other things, and cutlasses, and began to chop out the limbs of people. We have preserved this so that people will see and know indeed that the people, these soldiers, were in the church and they were shooting at people. Now you can see it's a bullet hole. It's a sizable bullet. There was a body here. The person was trying to escape and they fired at him. That's why you see this mark.
And that's just one painful reminder of what happened here on a day when more than 500 lives were taken in a place where they'd hoped to find peace. Instead, they were forced to sacrifice their lives, leaving behind a legacy not easily understood.
The people that were massacred in this church were buried under here. This is a very big grave. It's was well dug, and the bones were put into that. It got filled, and it was covered. Now, many of the kids that are playing basketball here don't even know that there are bones on here. They don't know.
By the time the fighting ended in 2003, nearly 250,000 Liberians were dead. Most of their country was reduced to rubble. Not a drop of running water, not a single power line. As John Sanders found out, though the war is over, most Liberians still spend their nights in total darkness.
When night falls here in Maryland County, Liberia, it is utterly dark. The only light comes from a few buildings that have their own generators. You can hear them rumbling through the night. The United Nations provides some street lights outside one of its buildings, so underneath it in the evening, people come together. They talk, play music, sometimes children do their homework. Their homes are dark, so this is their evening gathering place, this small pool of light in a world of darkness.
Even by day, Harper City remains a dark place. Most of its buildings are now bombed out, burned out shells. This was once a modern gas station. Today, instead of pumps, men sell gasoline siphoned from jars. This building was once a car dealership. Back in Monrovia, on the capital city's highest hill, one building stands as a 7-story monument to how far Liberia has fallen. At first glance, the pictures are something we've seen before. Desperate refugees, poor, traumatized by war. But this place is different. It was once a 5-star hotel run by a company called Intercontinental, which also operates a luxury hotel on Baltimore's Inner Harbor. Until 1990, this is how it looked. A sparkling pool, spotless rooms, endless views.
This place used to be a very decent area of 5-star hotel in Liberia, but now it is not functioning.
35-year-old Josh Logan lives on the 4th floor, where shattered windows leave residents exposed to the weather, and some families live more than 10 to a room.
These are the rooms that you are seeing here now, and down is the swimming pool, former swimming pool. It is still a swimming pool, but people cannot swim there again.
Right. And in here this was?
Through the lobby entrance where dignitaries once arrived, Josh leads us inside. The elevators haven't worked in years, so we start up the stairwell and walk into the darkness of the hotel corridor.
These were the hotel rooms.
Real hotel rooms, yeah. 106. 107.
The rooms and the hallways are home to more than 1,500 people. Some of the children have known no other home. A resident named Linda offered to show us inside her room, number 110.
110.
In what was a hotel guest room, Linda has boarded up the broken windows and improvised a small bed. She's 27 and has lived here since war came to her village in the countryside.
Why did you come here?
Because I never had anywhere to go. That's what I came here for. And the only place I had rescue. So this is why I'm here.
She lives without running water or electricity. In her bathroom, the toilet was looted in the war. It doesn't matter. The sewer doesn't work either. But for Linda, what's important is this room is safe. It offers shelter, and it is home. Just off the hotel's lobby, a scene that speaks to Liberia's desperation and determination. In what was once a grand reception area, children now study in a makeshift school, complete with desks and chalkboard. They want to be ready to work when normalcy finally returns. Our guide Josh attends the University of Liberia while he lives here, studying public administration and management. He says, though it's hard to believe, there's hope here.
Yes, people have hope. You can't live without hope. A hopeless person go crazy. You are confused. But people here, though they are poor, condition is not favoring them, but they have hope that tomorrow there will be a change. Tomorrow, condition will improve for them.
Today, peace has finally returned to Liberia. Rockets, machine guns, and grenades have been replaced with tools of rebuilding. Everywhere you look, people struggle to put themselves back to work and back in school. The task ahead is enormous, but they have begun.
I pledge allegiance to
Liberia's children are ready to learn again. Every morning, students recite Liberia's Pledge of Allegiance, borrowed almost word for word from our own.
With liberty and justice for all.
This is Cape Palmas High School in Harper, Maryland County. There are just over 600 students here, and their dreams and aspirations are not much different than students back in the States.
And who can name some of the colonial powers?
Students here have lived through enough to write their own history books. And with the literacy rate believed to be just over 30%, they are among the fortunate. Fewer than half of Liberia's children can afford school fees of about $60 a year. That's almost as much as the salary of the school's principal, who's also the history teacher.
In Liberian history, it's the same.
But at Cape Palmas High, books are hard to come by, and so is a working science lab. The one next door was looted during the war, and so far has not been restored.
Well, education, I will look at it, is very important to an individual as a whole. Because if you are educated, you will be able to carry your own destiny. You will know where you're coming from and you will know where you are going.
Students here pray their going will lead them to higher education.
After high school, I want to follow my education. I want to become a nurse.
After my high school, I want to go to college and I want to do civil engineer.
My dream is to become a journalist for Liberia or become an international journalist.
Those are the skills which used to be offered at the William V.S. Tubman College of Technology in Maryland County before it was destroyed during the Civil War. Today its buildings are abandoned shells. Cattle graze on what was once a thriving campus. Martin Naika is a former student whose hopes were dashed.
My hope now is that the government, under the administration of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, knowing the importance of education, will come to rehabilitate this institution.
The destruction of the Tubman College leaves students at Cape Palmas High with few options after graduation, but their optimism for their country is evident. You see and hear it as they sing Liberia's national anthem, written by Liberia's third president, Daniel Warner, who was born in Maryland, USA. From the classrooms to the soccer fields, where some kids keep playing, though they can't afford shoes, determination is evident, even in Liberia's darkest places. Senator John Balut represents Maryland County in Liberia's legislature, and the crumbling remains of his former home on Baltimore Street in Harper City, he imagines rebuilding the country by returning to the spirit of the freed slaves who founded it.
I think we need to pick up from where we started off, where our forefathers started off. They started a beautiful experiment that they sat down afterwards and said, well, we did a great job. I think it's about time we picked up from where they left off and try to make this experiment a success story.
No one feels the pressure to overcome Liberia's challenges more than this 68-year-old grandmother, Liberia's President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. She took office in 2006, due in large part to Liberia's women, who she says turned out in large numbers to put her into office. In March, she received a rare invitation to address the U.S. Congress.
I'm deeply touched by the honor bestowed on my small but proud West African Republic of Liberia.
And she even appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Johnson Sirleaf is Africa's first female elected leader and the first black woman elected president of any country in the world. At the end of our visit, she talked with us about the bonds between her country and ours.
Our culture in many ways takes from the culture of the United States. Much of our habits come from habits in the United States, so we enjoy the same types of things. All America needs to do now is to make sure that Liberia becomes its success story in Africa.
That's her message and her plea to America, delivered personally to President Bush. This Harvard-educated former World Bank official says investment in her country could become an inspiring success for America's efforts overseas. and for her efforts to improve the lives of Liberia's children.
When they smile and they talk and they say, I want to go to school, I want my mother to have a job, or I want my market woman, they're saying that we know we don't have it today, but we believe it's going to be there tomorrow. That is my greatest satisfaction.
For most Liberians, each new day is still a desperate struggle, but it holds the promise of a new beginning. In their schools, churches, and faces, you can see it, an enduring hope that they never lost, that a better day is ahead. During our week in Maryland County, we had seen destruction, despair, and desperate poverty. But on Sunday morning, something changes. The church bells toll, the choir sing, and just for a moment, there's a glimpse of what may lie ahead.
Our people still have hope. They believe that through God, things will change around. And when they change around, they will change around for the good.
At Mount Scott United Methodist Church in Harper, we were invited to share a word of inspiration. I'm thankful and honored to be here, not alone, but with friends of mine from Maryland, USA. I see people with hope. From Monrovia to Maryland County, from Plebo to Covella, from Tubman Town to Fishtown, I see hope. I see brighter days ahead. From war-torn buildings to war-torn lives, I still see hope. Hope not only spoken, but lived. All too soon, it's time to leave Maryland County. We found that though we are separated by the decades and the waters, our two Marylands remain family. In their warm faces, in their endless optimism, we see a small piece of ourselves. Among the ruins of a shattered country, they are starting from scratch. But Liberians have built a new nation before. Freed slave Alfred Russell captured our common spirit in a letter dated 1855. He would go on to become Liberia's president. His words remain just as true today.
All I can say is, I'm not alone. And dark as Liberia has been, and is, the day is breaking.
Africa's Maryland continues on our website. To see extended interviews, to find aid organizations working in Liberia, or to see the entire program, log on to WBALTV.com.